Welcome to Women of the World, a show which gives a voice to women from around the world who have chosen to make the United States their home. Here's today's moderator, Nadia Giordana.
Hello and welcome to Women of the World. I'm Nadia Giordana. I'll be the moderator today. To the side of me is Beverly Crosby. Beverly, thank you for co-hosting with me today.
It's my pleasure. This will be fun.
This is going to be a great discussion. We have a very special guest, Renate Sharp. And Renate, you grew up in Germany. And what we'll want to hear from you today is the story of, we'll be hearing in different layers of your story from growing up in Germany and then later coming to the United States and beyond that. But let's start with being a child in Germany when you were before school.
Okay. First of all, let me say thank you for having me. It's so nice to meet you and see you again, Nadia, Beverly. Before school, I remember a few things because I was born as the war started. Mm-hmm. So I recall being outside, was trying to get into an air raid shelter. And that was in a way scary. There were so many people in front of me. I was with my mother. There was an occasional plane flying above. There were stars twinkling, but all these people ahead. But we made it. We got in.
Did you have a sense of the urgency of the drama that was going on at the time?
I don't know. Mm-hmm. Well, yes. But, you know, how old was I?
You trust your parents.
5,
yeah.
Yes, so I was with my mother. In the morning, I would see smoldering ruins. I didn't see any corpses, okay? So that was good, I guess.
Yeah, very good.
Smoldering ruins. And once I recall being in bed with my mother, with them, and there was this big thump, and it woke us, and I was scared. What is it? And my mother calmed me and said, it's a bomb that was dropped late. So, yeah, I remember that, and again,
but
smoldering.
Did it actually explode, or was it just the thump of the landing, or did you even know at the time? Was it a loud noise?
I don't recall a big explosion, just a big thump. So, yes. No.
Depends on how far away it was.
It sounds as if you felt protected by your parents. So as a child...
My mother was me. My father was, all men were in the war.
That's true.
Yeah,
okay.
so I didn't. Yeah. And...
Well, then you, in a year or two after that, was it still during the war when you started school?
No, I started school after the war, but I do recall trying to get onto a train, and trains were so crowded, and my mother lifted me up and put me through a window into the train.
This was during the war, wasn't it?
That was, I'm not sure. That could have been just immediately after the war. I'm not sure. Yeah. So, and then she made it onto the train.
Where were you going? Do you know?
I don't remember where we were going then.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Or once that was somewhat embarrassing, and that was probably, again, I'm not sure exactly when, but we were not in Berlin. We were somewhere else. And there was a big knock at the door very, very early, and 2 Russian soldiers stood there and told my mother that the general needed to talk to her. So we had to get dressed, and they looked on while we got dressed. And I thought, well, what can you do? And well, some stories my mother.
And what was you were young.
Yes.
Did you know the nature of the business that they had, the question they had to ask your mother?
My mother? I think so. They said that my mother had helped somebody. Well, it wasn't really escape, but I recall my mother had met a young woman who said that she needed to get away from a Russian soldier officer, and my mother helped her. And I think that the two were connected.
So being a good Samaritan got her in a little bit of hot water.
I think so. She was in. I don't recall being there with her. But I know I left with her and with the two soldiers. And I recall my mother once saying after the war how naive she was. She loved her Steinway grand, and she loved to play the piano, and she had a good voice, not professionally, but she loved to sing. And after the war, she went to the Russian general and said, you know, the war is over. May I please have my piano back? And he opened his desk drawer, took out a revolver and said, lady, get out. And my mother said, she made a very fast exit then. So,
Renata, let me ask you, throughout all of that sounds so dramatic, but I know as a child, when you're going through it, it becomes your norm. And do you remember how you felt most of the time? Do you have good memories as well? Or do you remember being in a lot of fear?
Do you know, no, not all the time. No, not all the time. But I do recall different episodes that were not necessarily causing great fear, but maybe unpleasant, like being in a camp with refugees and being sprayed with a gun, being deloused. And I said, Mom, I'm sure we don't have lice, you know, but everyone was deloused. Or trying to get into that air raid shelter, or some stories that my mother told me, or going from a no man's land where my mother had maybe safeguarded some things, like when you pack up things because you don't want to lose everything in a war. So there were a few little silver pieces, and stuffing her raincoat pockets and going past the Russian guard into the western sector again. And that was frightening. I remember dressing up as peasant women, and there was a little girl, so I don't know how much we rescued. Basically lost
a few things.
Everything. But I think now of all the wars going on and the poor refugees and what they suffer. So I think it was one. The one good thing after the war, I remember, that was then in Munich, and there was the American military, and a very kind American soldier gave me an orange. I had never seen an orange before, and I took a bite, and there was the bitter peel, and then the sweet juice. My mother knew what it was, but no, I didn't at the time, and care packages, and so on. But it was interesting too. My mother said what she remembered, that the Russian soldiers, when arrived in rags, some were barefoot. Their shoes, their leather had disintegrated.
So they were dressed in virtually rags.
In rags.
Why was that, I wonder?
I don't know.
I
wish I had asked more questions.
Oh, sure.
But I guess it was war is awful, and that's all they had. And my mother also mentioned that the Russian officers whom she met, they had excellent manners.
Good manners.
Yes.
But some of them were so dressed in such rags some of them didn't even have shoes.
She said,
how do you fight a war without shoes?
I don't know. It was.
So their government just didn't give them their needs. They probably didn't have very good food to eat either.
Probably
I know
not.
some of the other countries were going through the same thing, where they just didn't provide for their service people.
Yeah, it's not like you plan for a big war like that. Right. Sure.
No.
Yeah.
The one friend, the best friend of my mother, once said that it is very interesting, but also, I don't want to say gratifying, but how helpful people are in war when they look out for neighbors and try to help.
Oh, so that must be wonderful. There are probably stories that anyone that was living during that time can tell about helping each other, and that's probably some of the most gratifying things.
And it could be with food or first aid, whatever you are able to do. Yes, that helps.
Did you have siblings?
No, I'm an only child. Some would say I'm spoiled. But my mother came from a larger family, but that's also a generational difference. There were 6 in her family.
Oh, how
But
nice.
it was just you and
Yeah.
your mom together
Yes, it was
surviving.
Yes, it was, yeah. And my parents were divorced and after the war, and that was very difficult for my mother.
Well, you and I were talking right before the show, and you mentioned something that I think is just the most delightful fact. And you talked about the going to school, having backpacks,
Oh,
but
yes,
you talked about your little personal chalkboards with chalk. And the first thing I thought of was young children going to school today with their tablets.
Yeah.
They had personal little chalkboards and chalk, and you told a story about that. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
And we had these backpacks that actually looked like a briefcase, but then they had these straps and they were made out of leather. Put them in our bags, and in the winter, there was slippery spots, so we wanted to slide, and if there was a hill, we walked to grade school, and then we would fall on our backs and slide on that backpack too. And these little chalkboards, many times they were broken. Well, not every day.
Well, they're
And,
made out of real slate in
yes,
those days,
yes.
so cold and an impact that
Yeah.
they're going to break.
And that was not too good. That was not, but yes, we did that. And it was, I don't know how many miles it was. It seemed like a long walk, but that was in Munich then, and it didn't get as cold as here. So it was good.
So it didn't get to 20, 30 below, but you still had
no.
snow, plenty of snow.
We had
and
snow, definitely.
below
yes.
freezing weather. Yeah.
Yes, we had that too.
Yeah.
And when you're a child, you're somewhat childproof.
Yeah.
We're childproof.
Yeah.
You know what was interesting too? When you're a child and you don't read numbers yet, and where we were living, that's my mother and I, by the way, we didn't have a place. So the government took care of them refugees and assigned them to homes where the owner had some extra space. So we ended up living in one room, but in one room in a house, or actually it was a fourplex that belonged to an old lady. And these were many row houses. And I couldn't read numbers when I started school, and they all looked alike.
They all looked alike.
And I thought, how am I going to find my home? But I did learn. Okay, it was.
At least visually, you'd learn to at
Yes.
least visually see that.
Yes.
Number.
But initially, where am I? All these homes that look alike.
So then later on, you came to the United States. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that journey.
Yes, on a boat, and so many people got seasick. That was in the spring, and
And you were how old?
16. I was 16, and it was frightening a bit. There was this uncertain future. It was under the auspices of the Lutheran Church, and we were to go to Minnesota, to Northfield, Minnesota. But we arrived in New York, and I
Ellis Island, was
Ellis
it?
Island, yes. And I see the sign, sure, the Statue of Liberty, and I thought, but here I see a sign, hot dogs, and this long, I thought, hot dogs. No, I realized Americans were not eating dogs, but still, the term.
Sure.
Or Frankfurters, hamburgers. Now, Frankfurt is
that's a
in
town.
Germany. Yes, so is Hamburg. Now, and Hamburg now is known for its wonderful orchestra hall.
So we had frankfurters and hamburgers.
Yeah. And never had them in Germany, so what is this? It was funny. And then a fantastic train ride to Minnesota with an upper deck, I recall. And then, being in Northfield, Minnesota.
That's a great town.
It is a great town, but it also was culture shock coming from Munich. The slogan in Munich was Weltstadt mit Herz, world city with heart. In Northfield, the slogan was city of cows, colleges, and contentment. So when you're a 16-year-old, some 16-year-olds, and I think it's wonderful when they hail from a farm and they love their animals and the sheep and the cows. But to me at that time, cows and contentment was not for what I was looking.
You were more interested in the idea of city and the what people I think imagine a lot about America, which is certainly true in New York and the big cities, but all the promise that the country, the image of the promise that's there. Is that what you were?
Yes. Well, I think I was naive. My mother was very realistic. She never expected it to be easy. And I didn't either. I didn't quite know what to expect. Certainly everyone had heard of Texas and cowboys. And there is a German author who wrote stories about Indians and cowboys, and Germans just loved those stories, and they were all a figment of his imagination, but very compelling. And he pursued what is morally right and helping them. And yeah, I lived on those books too. Karl May was the author, M-A-Y, Karl May.
M-A-Y.
So when you were in Germany, that's what you heard about, was that America had cowboys, Indians, and that was your idea, that was your perception of what you would find
Not
in
solely,
America?
not solely, but certainly there was the association of Indians and the Wild West and cowboys. And there were some songs, like later on, "Don't Fence Me In," and the horseback riding, and Winnetou. He was a chief, an Indian chief. It was really, in a way, magic and wonderful stories. And so when I came here, it was different. And
it would be.
It wasn't what you expected.
Not quite. People were very, very friendly, very nice, really, and so it was wonderful. But
did you have other German, maybe not friends, but were there other Germans that were immigrating at the same time?
I met some, but somehow the chemistry was not right. There was better chemistry and more talk with Americans who had come here a long time ago. But what I mentioned to say too, what's no longer the case, when I was a student in Germany too, we got these cheap tickets to the opera, the symphony, and they don't do that now anymore, but that was wonderful too. And here, and Northfield was great. I ended up, and I'm really thankful also to Carleton, because I thought Carleton then was a better fit, even though I was brought up as a Lutheran.
Carleton College?
Carleton College, because the Lutherans, I had never heard of different synods.
That'd be
before.
St. Olaf. That was a Lutheran school. Carleton was
actually Methodist, but primarily non-denominational.
I got it, yeah.
And so many Lutherans in Northfield said that dancing is the downfall of women. You have to interpret the Bible literally. And so much has changed within the Lutheran Church. But that was so foreign to me. And I said, well, no, you interpret the Bible so it makes sense, no? So God gave us a brain.
So there were big differences between those two schools. Did you go to college at Carleton then?
Yes, and Carleton let me study there for free, and I stayed at home, lived with my mother.
Great.
So I'm very appreciative of Carleton and the Lutheran Church, even though when the church initially did not ordain women, I think, why not? You know, so sort of drifted away.
Well, at what age did you marry?
I was 27.
Was that someone you met here in Minnesota?
Someone, no, I met in Texas.
Oh, you got to Texas.
I got to Texas, yes, and that some wonderful episodes too. And that was, actually, I was a judge advocate in the Air Force. I'd gone to law school and spent some time there.
Oh, okay, so you went to law school and you were in the Air Force.
And I was in the Air Force.
Fill us in a little bit on that.
A lot of stories along the way here.
So that was, yes. Was and then was sent to Germany, and that's where my daughter was born. In Wiesbaden, Germany. And at that time, no pregnant military.
Well, you were in the military then,
Yeah, so
and that's when you went back to Germany.
Yes, yes, because my husband was assigned to Germany, and then they assigned me, and yes. So
Were you there for a couple of years?
we were there for a couple of years, yes.
And then back here.
And then back here and back to Minnesota, yes. And yes, I'm sorry, but my husband and I, we divorced. And yeah, so I worked quite long for the St. Paul companies, which I have fond memories of the St. Paul companies.
That's a prominent company.
It is, yes, but it was, I hate to say it. Yeah, I think it was gobbled up by Travelers. Travelers is very different.
Oh,
and
sure.
It's a very good company, but it doesn't have the same affinity for Minnesota. It's basically an Eastern company.
And then coming into your retirement years, let's see, you were, well, was this before retirement when you were involved with the Humphrey program?
No, that was in retirement.
Tell us about that.
That's a wonderful program. It's a Department of State program that brings approximately 130, 40 mid-career people from emerging countries here and distributes them for an academic year over maybe 12 universities, depending on their interest. And my partner now, Donald, and I, we were sort of affiliated with the University of Minnesota Law School, and that is where the human rights activists were. Now it's all at the Humphrey Institute. So our first fellow was from Pakistan, and it was very interesting too. And Fadia was our latest fellow. She was from Yemen.
And Fadia is a co-host on this show. That's how we know each other. And that's nice to know.
Yeah, it's a fantastic program, and the people we've met, they are so idealistic and really in different ways wanting to help their home country, whether it is like Fadia works for young people, and she wanted to prevent youth from being, becoming child soldiers.
Oh, sure.
Being, I don't want to say captured, but by Al-Qaeda. So there are others who work for families and all the idealists and human rights in the police forces and so on. So we've met wonderful people from different parts of the world, different religions.
Oh, yes.
And, and sometimes so you speak of Islam, but you see sometimes the great similarity in gender roles when you talk to Muslims too, and trying to go beyond that. Yeah, it's a great program, and I hope it will continue.
It's amazing how you have adapted, with the background and just with your mother and going on to college. That's, and then going into another career with the military, back here, and then involvement in your organizations. You adapted pretty well, I would say.
But Americans have been very kind. The ones I've met have been helpful, very kind, very interesting, and yes, so
that is great.
Many thanks. I owe a lot to many people.
We're getting closer to the end of the program, but you also were and this has been after the Humphrey program, you founded the European Christmas Market. Tell us what that is about.
Yes, that is a replica of an almost 800-year-old tradition in Austria and Germany. And so we have the European Christmas Market here. We are a 501c3, and we are located in downtown or lower town at Union Depot on the East Plaza. And the goal is, besides being a replica of an old Christmas market in Germany, so we help artists and artisans who do not have brick and mortar. They depend on events like the State Fair, and Christmas is so important to their livelihood. Or we have some imports, but we have many local artisans. The emphasis is on handmade goods.
I was going to say handmade items.
Yes. And then there's also traditional foods like German brats.
Oh, they have foods too?
Foods too, yes, and Polish pierogies, and potato pancakes.
Oh, we have to go.
Yes, please go.
We have to be there.
And so we want to help the artists and also familiarize Minnesotans with these traditional Christmas foods and drive people downtown. It's nice to have a vibrant downtown.
And where are they downtown again?
Union Depot, the East Plaza, the first 2 weekends in December this year. So it's Friday through Sunday, December 1 through 3rd, and 8th through 10th.
So it's not a year-round thing?
No, no, no. It's just for Christmas.
I've heard you mention downtown, but this is downtown St. Paul.
Downtown St. Paul.
At the Union Depot.
Yes.
Not
yes.
Minneapolis, but
Not
St.
that's
Paul.
right, yeah.
Right.
And we have a website. It's stpaulchristmasmarket.org.
stpaulchristmasmarket.org.
Yeah.
We'll
So
put
it's
that on the screen. Sure.
It's a cultural event. It's also educational.
Are there
We have
performers and things
we
that
have,
happen?
We have performers, we have musicians, and we are working on, we would like to expand and have more performers. We have Norwegian folk dancers. We have, yes, carolers.
I think the folk dancing would be loads.
Was
so
lovely.
fun.
And we had some reading of different Christmas stories to children. And yes, and little fires too.
Sounds like a
So
wonderful
and what will be new this year too, we will have stars on top of each Christmas kiosk. So I think they will really add to the ambiance, and there will be more new items. We're still working on it. We are all volunteers.
Well, I'm going to make a point to get down there.
Oh, me too.
We're running
Sounds
out of
fabulous.
time, but Beverly, thank you for being here as co-host.
Thank
Renata, thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
coming on the show. This is fascinating. You have a wonderful story. And thank you all for watching us today on Women of the World. We'll see you next time.